Welcome to the Production Talk podcast with me, Jan of mixartist.com.au. In this podcast series, we celebrate the modern way of producing music. We want to talk about all things related to songwriting, recording at home, and music production. So if you produce your music at home, this is the place to be. Please subscribe and recommend this podcast to all your friends. This is the Production Talk podcast, episode 45.
Check 1 2 1 2.
So we gotta get close, but when
that's
you
fine.
Speak sort of on axis,
Like this?
They're a bit sensitive to.
Okay, so better about here?
Yeah, and maybe just a touch closer. You have headphones right there.
Oh yeah.
You should be able to hear yourself. There's a bit of wind, but
check 1 2. Oh, I sound crisp and clear. Listen to that.
It's not bad. Yeah, just maybe turn the gains down just a touch.
Check 1 2 1 2. Pop pop pop.
Oh yeah, all right.
I won't be doing that. Don't worry.
Okay.
I won't be doing sirens.
Are the headphones too loud for you?
No, it's good. I prefer without. Then I'm less self-conscious about my voice. Like when I can hear my voice really loud and present, then it's like I become more. I'm start to think about how my voice sounds rather than what I'm saying.
Okay.
So I prefer like this. Yeah. Yeah.
Look, we're already talking about recording philosophy.
Yeah, there you go.
That's great.
Yeah.
Look, I like to start my episodes with an acknowledgement of country, if you're okay with it.
100%, I would prefer that. Thank you.
Good, so welcome back to another episode of the Production Talk podcast. And let's first acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land that we are meeting on today, the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nations, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Big love. Mm-hmm. So we're out in Suffolk Park today, sitting outside Jake's house. With me is Mr. Jake Savona. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for
nice to be here. Thank you so much, and it's nice to start the show with a welcome to country, especially when we ride along National Park here in a very beautiful tea tree lake.
Yes.
On the way to Broken Head. So it's definitely an area rich in history and culture. You know,
it truly is. It truly is. Jake, you are a full-time musician.
It's true.
How old were you when you realized that music would be your future career?
Well, I started playing piano at 6 years old, but I didn't really start to get super passionate about music until maybe I was 13 years old. And I remember listening to some of my mum's vinyl. And I remember in particular putting on some J.S. Bach. I can't remember. I think it was like a violin concerto. It was definitely something orchestral. And I suddenly remember being able to... It was... Suddenly, rather than just being this massive sound, I could suddenly hear the bass parts and the high parts and the middle parts and all the polyphony in that music. Suddenly, I remember just like opened up. It was like my consciousness had expanded or my ears had suddenly clicked, and suddenly I could hear all the individual parts simultaneously in the music. And it's like, wow, this is how the composers heard their music, you know? And then I started collecting a lot of jazz vinyl, and that's when I started getting into improvisation and blues and jazz and so forth. And then my interest in music just tripled, quadrupled, basically. And but when I studied music, I did a music degree at Melbourne University. I got a scholarship and actually went over to the UK and finished it in Glasgow, which was an amazing experience. Yeah. Then I lived in Brixton after that, and that's where I started hearing all the sound system parties, and I got introduced to bass music, the proper, Josh Shaka and the proper bass and sound system parties. And it was like my initiation, really. And I came back to Australia, I bought my first sampler and I started making beats, but I didn't become full-time music until about 2017, I think it was. No, sorry, 2007, because I'd released an album. I actually went to Jamaica in 2004 and I came back and released the album, which I called Melbourne Meets Kingston. And Triple J picked that up, and suddenly I was booked for festivals, and I became full-time music from about then. Yeah, right.
Okay, that basically started... a musical story. We'll get a little bit more into that later on. But I think the first time that I saw you on stage, I'm not quite sure when that was, but I believe it was with the Melbourne Ska Orchestra.
Yeah, that's very possible. Yeah. I was playing many shows with them. Yeah, I guess we're in 22 now, I guess from like 2015 or 16 to about 2019, basically up until the pandemic. And we did some really nice tours. We played WOMAD, we played Blues Fest. So yeah, there's a big band. Nicky Bomber leads. Often there were 2 or 3 keyboard players. So very fun project.
Phenomenal band. I've never seen anything like this. Nothing comes close to that. And it's one of those bands that, even if you listen to the record, you don't even get a glimpse of just how powerful it is.
It's
live.
very entertaining live, and it's very fun, very energetic,
chunky, and lovely, good, fantastic. So, but you also were involved in lots of your own projects. So you are not just a musician, but you're also a producer. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean,
how did you learn the craft?
Well, like I said, I studied sort of classical music and music composition and classical piano performance up until the age of about 21, 22. I finished my degree in 2000 in the UK. But I remember actually at high school, because I was the classical nerd, and I wanted to start playing in the jazz bands, and none of the jazz musicians, they were all a bit too cool for school, and they wouldn't show me any scales or any of their tricks. So I ended up doing what a classical musician would do and started notating all their solos, like Miles Davis solos and Wynton Kelly, who's one of my favorite piano players. And that's sort of how I learned the blues scales. And I suddenly realized, okay, there's like, it's not just this like unapproachable or impossible music for a classical musician. Actually, there's scales and forms. And I just I loved that. That's how I sort of taught myself. And then fast forward, like I said, I finished my music degree in the UK. I lived in Brixton. I fell in love with Jamaican music. And I came back I bought a Yamaha SU700 sampler in London and brought it back to Australia and started sampling my vinyls and started experimenting with making beats. That was even before I had a laptop with Pro Tools, So all my first beats were off the sampler. And I released an album in, I think it was 2001, just called Bass and Roots, actually. Was my first record. And, the first 2 albums I did, there's a couple tracks that are okay, but it was very much me learning my craft. But it was when I went to Jamaica for the first time in 2004, and I took a whole lot of instrumentals that I'd recorded with my band in Melbourne, or I produced some of the tracks as well, and I took them to Jamaica. And that was, the first ever time, I believe, an Australian producer had gone to Jamaica and worked on a record. So that's why I called it Melbourne Meets Kingston. And I never dreamt at that time that later on I would be going to Cuba and I'd have a Havana Meets Kingston project. But the name turned out to be really useful later on, So, but back in 2004, I called it Melbourne Meets Kingston, and we released the album on Elephant Tracks, a Sydney hip-hop label. In 2007 it came out. And Triple J really supported it, and that was great. Suddenly I was being booked for festivals, and at the time I was like, but I'm not a DJ, He said, no, you just have to do it, go and do it. And so I became a DJ almost by accident.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's cool. So in some ways you were actually years ahead. You basically did international collaborations before it was hip.
Well, I kind of had to. I think if I'd been living in London or living in Berlin or living somewhere where there's a big Caribbean population, or there's at least a lot of travel, because when I grew up in Australia, there were almost no Africans in Australia. There wasn't any Jamaican vocalists, and even in Melbourne now, there's very, very, very few Jamaicans that come to Australia. We're so far away,
Yes.
So I was craving that sound of Jamaica. I was listening to reggae, I was listening to dancehall, and Jamaicans singing patois. They singing. Their music is very culture and identity and orientated, So I just realized early on, okay, I'm going to have to get to Jamaica if I really want to hear how the music sounds there and how it feels there. I actually need to get to the heartland of the music. So went to Jamaica for the first time in 2004 and just kept going back. I loved it so much.
Cool. And I would imagine, the cultural differences obviously are pretty impressive, I guess. What is the difference in their production and style and in their performance style? How is that different to what you were used to here in Australia?
Well, I mean, I was still learning my trade even back then, and I guess my first trip to Jamaica, I wasn't really seeing how other people were producing beats, because I went to Jamaica with a bag of instrumentals, so, and then I would just play artists over their rhythms. In the studio, I ended up in Negril, which is on the other side of Jamaica to Kingston. And in the end, there was this, this was even before Facebook or Instagram or anything, so it was a lot of word of mouth. And at the time, I was a humble guy just starting out, but word sort of spread in that town that there was this famous producer. I was totally not famous. I still don't believe I'm famous. So so I ended up having queues of Jamaican singers, especially younger singers who was just starting up, queuing to audition actually. And so I had all these like great singers that I found just because they rolled up to the studio and waited patiently. Some waited for days, for a chance to get in the studio. Yeah. So it was a very, very interesting story. And Jesse my friend who I went with, who runs the Chant Down Babylon Burning, the show on PBS FM in Melbourne. It's one of the longest running radio shows in the world. It's definitely the longest reggae show in Australia. I think they hit their 20-year mark recently. But he called me. What did he call me? Jake Ruby, after Jack Ruby, because Jack in the some famous old film. Is it Rockers? Or it's one of the films where you see Jack Ruby, who produced Burning Spear, auditioning artists. And there's a queue of Jamaican artists in that old film waiting to perform for him. So, it was quite there's that culture there of produce. So one interesting thing in Jamaica is it's changed a lot now in the last 5 to 10 years. But when I first went to Jamaica, you were either a producer or an artist, So a producer is someone that make the rhythm, make the instrumental.
Yep.
And the artist is someone that sings or raps or sing jays, which is what they call in Jamaica when it's a mix of melodic singing and rapping, And it's very rare that any artist would do both roles. So the singer would go to the producer, find the rhythm, and then they record. But now artists like Protege, I think even Chronics, a lot of them are getting very much involved in their own production. The Marleys have been doing that for a while. Stephen Marley's a great producer as well as a singer. Yeah. I don't know how many Grammys Stephen Marley has now, but
I love his music.
Yeah. A lot of the artists now in Jamaica realize, well, if they produce the rhythm as well, then they'll get 100% of the publishing, not just 50%, So
I see.
It's become a lot more common that artists are involved in the music and the production. Yeah.
I've worked with a handful of Jamaican singers over the years, and what struck me is that all of them seem to be 10 dBs louder than anybody else I've ever met. They seem to have really, really strong, loud vocals. Is that your experience as well?
100%. It's like one of the things I love about Jamaican music is, like the confidence of the vocals. Definitely dancehall. It's like high energy, and they have this style of rapping that they call DJing. We think of a DJ as someone that plays the songs. Since Jamaica, since the 60s, and they're one of the first countries to have vocalists that would improvise lyrics over a record, like artists way back like U-Roy and Big Youth and these artists, U-Roy. King Tubby was doing some of the first sound system parties in Kingston, some of the first sound system parties in the world, I believe. So, they'd start in the afternoon and go to lunchtime the next day, and King Tubby would string up these massive sound systems. This is the beginning of the remix as well. And we're talking late 60s, early 70s, because King Tubby would get the mixes and he would cut a dub plate, like a acetate, like a one-off vinyl, and he'd do his own unique mix because he had the tape. So you can imagine in Jamaica back then, say a hit record had just come out, and then suddenly the next day Jamaicans are hearing it on the radio, and the next day or that week King Tubby's got a sound system party somewhere, and he actually play the hit song, hype up the crowd, and then flip the record and actually play his own unique dub or version. And actually Jamaicans thought he was a wizard. They, in the beginning, before it became common practice, they actually thought he was a magician and he was somehow doing magic up there, because they couldn't believe they were hearing the hit song that just come out, but a stripped back version, a different mix, maybe with vocals coming in and out in dub, like it's almost like quite ghostly, Yeah. And then U-Roy, who was travel with him, would do it live, sort of rapping the DJ style over the record. So it would have been something to behold, because now we take it for granted, the remix, and we go to a party and we'll see someone emceeing over the track or hyping up. But back then it was revolutionary, So this little island in the Caribbean, Jamaica, they basically invented the remix. They invented the version. They invented, and they were very key in the beginning of rap and hip hop in terms of you see U-Roy in the studio doing his DJ versions of tracks. He's literally got like a sort of a 58 or something similar in his hand, like running around the studio like he's on stage, You just never see that in the studio. Normally you've got the mic and you've got your headphones on and, you want to make sure there's no noise and stuff. Like you see some of the footage of U-Roy and it's literally like he's on stage, but he's in a studio, and he's just improvising the vocals and that's the cut and that gets released. It's a great tradition that they began that's still very strong. So back to what you're saying about the vocals being so confident and loud. Yeah, I think they have that when they're in the studio, that's like they're performing live, you know? It's like, and in Jamaica, you have to be good to get a chance in the studio. There's so much competition. Their quality, their skill level so high anyway. So you have to be up there to actually even get a chance to get in the studio, you know? You can't be sort of timid or shy. It doesn't work.
And that leads to, I guess, a rather quick production turnover.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look at Lee Perry. I was thinking about him the other day. Like, he's releasing 10 LPs a year or more, you know, like, and so many sevens and singles. Like, I'm almost ashamed of how slow, you know, we have a 3-month release plan and rah for one song and this whole thing. Like back then they're just churning it out, you know, and same with Motown and all these labels. They just had great musicians who wanted to work, who wanted to play, really creative, banging it out, you know?
Yeah, right. So do you prefer that, you know, fast workflows when it comes to producing? But what are the pros and cons of, you know, spending a year or two in a studio and, you know, taking 2 days to tune a snare, or just get it together and knock it out?
Yeah, I much prefer the quick process because it's so satisfying. Like sometimes I'll write a beat and I'll have all the inspiration and the excitement in 5 minutes, you know? Like I can basically write a new track and have all that vibe and energy and all the new ideas, like within half an hour, the basic track. But then by the time you get a vocalist in and record and write the vocals and mix it, it could be a year later, you know? So it's a bit, it kind of drags it out a bit. But that's quite normal in these days and times because we kind of produce and tend to overproduce things, I think, as well. You know, like looking for perfection or, you know, really taking the time with the mix. You know, there's drawbacks as well as positives to that.
Yeah. And is it right that you also mix your own music? Or some of it at least?
No, I'll mix everything to maybe I'm 90% happy with the mix. And then I generally get like Glenn Christensen, Terra Stylus is his producer name. He's in Melbourne. He helps me with the final mix. It can be great to have another set of ears, you know, just because when you've been working on something for months, you can lose perspective.
Yes.
And he's a very experienced mix engineer, so he can kind of add a bit of that extra magic.
So you formed like a team there, where, you know, you get it really to one place and he takes it to the next level with you together. Fantastic.
Yeah. But I mean, I'll always do the final mix, but I'll ask him, you know, please tighten up these drums, or I'm not happy with this vocal sound. Can you get a bit more, you know, shine or silkiness or magic or something? So it's really good to have a sort of and it's like I don't want to use the word assistant. He's not my assistant, but someone to assist me with, you know, that final mix. Yeah.
Cool. And are you happy to talk about your mixing setup? Do you work from home or do you rent studios to mix? You know,
a bit of both. Like I don't. I love, like, especially with a project like Havana Meets Kingston, where it's, you know, these amazing musicians like Sly and Robbie, the Jamaican rhythm section, you know, some of the musicians from the Buena Vista Social Club. And so I've got these amazing musicians that we recorded in this incredible studio in Havana. But so I want to run it to tape. I want to run it through a nice desk. I don't have $1 million SSL desk. That would be nice.
Right. Okay.
So often I've mixed at Sing Sing in Melbourne, or now the Box Hill Tape have the Sing Sing desk. So I've mixed a bit there. I've also mixed on a nice Neve desk at at a friend's studio in Mullum. So generally I like to that's Dave Atkins, by the way, from what's his project? It'll come to me in a minute, but he's got a nice studio in Mullum with a nice Neve desk.
Is that Dave?
Yeah, Dave.
Dave Atkins, he's got a custom series. I installed that. No, actually I didn't. I've maintained that. I was
good on you.
Involved in the build of that console. A long time ago. He's a legend. What a drummer he is.
Yeah, totally. Amazing. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Look, you've given us a couple of teasers already of course, the project that we need to talk about, Havana Meets Kingston.
Yes.
Just before we talk about this, can you just describe, you know, it was a new thing. It wasn't possible up until you took this project and made it real. What was the political climate before? You know, Havana and Cuba, Jamaica, they were close together, but can you describe why they couldn't?
So it's so interesting because Jamaica and Cuba are two islands in the Caribbean. They're literally 160 miles apart. I didn't realize how close they were. I was going to Jamaica for all these years. You know, I love Cuban music. I'd grown up with the Buena Vista Social Club. I think I found that album when I was about 19 or 20. And as someone that loved to play jazz piano, I mean, their Cuban jazz is just another level. They have a very unique sound, you know.
World class.
But then, I got distracted by Jamaica and kind of forgot about Cuba, and just it was like I first went to Jamaica in 2004, But I didn't get to Cuba till 10 years later, 2014. And how that happened is I was in San Fran and I had a flight to Jamaica a few days later. And a friend of mine, Sahida, had just come back from Cuba, and I saw some of her photos on Facebook of Havana. It's like, wow, I'd seen photos of Cuba before, but I'd just forgotten how beautiful it is. I thought, wow, I really need to get there. It looks so amazing. And I looked it up on the map and suddenly realized, man, it's right next to Jamaica. I didn't realize. And then I looked at flights and they were cheap from Jamaica to Cuba. So I thought, wow, and so I booked a 10-day in that Jamaica trip in 2014. In the middle of the trip, I booked a 10-day trip to Cuba. So I flew Kingston to Havana, had 10 days in Cuba and traveled around and had all kinds of crazy stories. It was really fun. And on the last day in Havana, I remember sitting in this nice cafe in Old Havana, drinking coffee and daydreaming, and they were playing Cuban rumba on the CD player. And rumba's like a percussion music it's folkloric, but it's also very spiritual. It's connected with the Santeria, the religion in Cuba. And suddenly I had this idea of, well, how would it sound with the Naibingi, the Jamaican sort of sacred music mixed up? How would reggae sound with salsa? And I just thought that, wow, this would be a cool project. I'd love to do it. And I thought, for sure someone would have done this before, because in Miami, there's so many Jamaicans and Cubans living together. Yeah. So when I got back to Australia, I did some research and I realized, well, actually, no, there hadn't ever been anything like this, because in Miami, the Jamaicans don't speak Spanish and the Cubans don't really speak English, so there's not a lot of mingling, Yeah. And then I thought, well, maybe over the years there've been some projects like this, but I spoke to people and there literally never had been, because what happened when the Cuban Revolution happened? Before that was in the 50s. Before that, there was a lot of cross-pollination between Cuba and Jamaica and a lot of travel back and forth. But when Fidel had his revolution and took over Cuba, became the president of Cuba, America imposed the sanctions and suddenly it was cut off from the world. And so that kind of blocked all that trade. And also you got to remember, Cubans, again, don't speak English. Jamaicans don't speak Spanish. So that was literally a language barrier. Yeah. And then the economics, both islands are very poor, particularly Cuba. I mean, both have rich pockets for sure, like all countries, but it was crazy, no record label or no one had ever funded something like this. So I got back to Australia and I realized it would cost a lot of money, but I really wanted to do it. So me and my friend Molai did a grant together and I got the grant. And so that was from the Australia Council. And that was $50,000. So I literally put all that money into the flight. I called up Sly, actually. He's from Sly Dunbar, who's part of the Sly and Robbie team, and said, do you want a trip to Cuba? And they all loved the idea. They'd always wanted to go to Cuba, but they'd never had the chance. So everyone loved the idea. That was the great thing about this project. Everyone loved the idea so much that it just opened the doors, And so fast forward 6 months later, I'd bought them all flights. I'd booked the studios. I'd organised the fees for everyone. That was pretty much the whole grant gone, but it was such a good use of the money, And yeah, I flew to Jamaica, picked them all up, flew to Cuba, and the rest is history, as they say. We did 10 days at Egram Studios in central Havana, which is the most beautiful studio. It's where the Buena Vista Social Club album was recorded. Yeah.
And
it was just magic. Studio, the whole trip was magic, yeah.
Who was your engineer there? Did you engineer yourself?
I took Eric Coelho, who I believe you know.
Yes, I know Eric.
Eric is the partner of Anna Coelho, and Anna's was managing the project that time for about 3 or 4 years, for the whole time the Havana Meets Kingston was sort of initially happening. And Anna actually came to Cuba sort of, I think halfway through the sessions, she flew in. And Eric was wonderful because he's Argentinian, so he's fluent Spanish. He loved the idea of the project. He loves reggae. He came to Jamaica before Cuba as well, and it was his first time in Jamaica. So it was an amazing trip for him. We also had the assistant engineers that work at Egram, but they were lovely, but quite lazy, actually. We really had to push them to do anything. So it was really good to have Eric there because he was just onto it, working fast, working hard. And a lot of the equipment at Egram wasn't working, which was frustrating on one hand, but it kind of didn't matter because the room itself sounds so good, and all the microphones were working. They have these beautiful 1930s and 1940s microphones. They had 4 or 5 original U47s,
Oh, wow.
And it's funny because Uroldi Abro, who's the amazing conga player on the project, and is considered maybe Cuba's top conga player. He literally grabbed all the 47s and put them on the congas, and he said, that's how we do it. This is how we record the congas. And I had to slowly wean the 47s away from him because we wanted to use them for vocals and other things as well, you know. But yeah, they had some beautiful ribbon mics as well, 87s. They might have had a 67 there as well. So yeah, very, very nice microphones.
Yeah. Look, what really stands out to me on this record is the horn sound. And whatever you did there, they just sound so natural, so punchy, so clean, but also so full of character all at the same time. And
well, they're such amazing players. Like Julito Padron, who's the key trumpet player who I've taken on tour, he has this almost a Cuban version of the Miles Davis tone, I guess. He's so atmospheric, and so every note he plays is just brilliant.
Yeah.
And yeah, recording in that room, the horns just sound good. Egram has this amazing kind of short but woody and really nice reverb. It's a very unique sound, actually, that studio. Horns, piano, everything sounds so good in there.
Yeah, fantastic. And how did the songs come together? Did you rehearse with the band? Did you give them directions? Did you write all the songs and put them together before you got there?
Yeah, before leaving Australia, I was thinking about doing charts and everything. And I realized it's going to be so time-consuming. But I also realized, no, I just want to sketch out the songs because that way, if it's easy charts, just with chords and a few riffs and a few ideas for sort of bass lines or, you know, melodies, then that will give them enough structure, but also enough freedom to relax and to really play. And it worked out the best possible thing I could have done because everyone just took those ideas and took them to another level. Robbie almost always changed the bass lines that I gave him and improved them, of course. You know, there was only a couple tunes where I had to say, no, please play at least a little bit of the bass line that I wrote, and then I would mix the lines, you know. Chan Chan was one of those ones, and yeah, he made up his own bass line, but we recorded the one. So in the mix, I would just sort of switch between his two bass lines, you know. And yeah, by doing that, it was just nice. It just meant the musicians could relax. They're so good. There's Cuban jazz is very advanced, so you know a song with 8 chords is very simple for them. And
all right. Wow. So when you work with musicians on that level, do they still get nervous in the studio? Do you need to work with the performances? Do they sometimes?
Not at all. Like it was like the very first song we recorded was actually the instrumental it's called 410 San Miguel, which is the address of the studio. And actually, I took the instrumental we recorded there, and later I took it to Jamaica, and I found Ernest Wrangler. We went out to his country house, and I recorded his guitar, and he's basically Jamaica's top guitarist and one of the inventors of reggae music, you know, way back in the Studio One days and before. But that initial session, like me and Eric, I remember we just looked at each other as the musicians started playing because, remember, there was the language divide. You know, the Cubans don't speak English and the Jamaicans don't speak Spanish. And I'd put the chords out and I'd kind of on the piano for Rolando, our pianist sort of showed him the chords and everyone. And then I just counted the band in. And as soon as everyone started playing, I was like, wow, this is from the beginning, it was already sounding amazing, you know. And it was a very nice atmosphere in the studio because they were so interested. Everyone was so interested in the project. So the Cubans really wanted to hear what the Jamaicans were going to do and vice versa. And so they really listened and they really sort of made a lot of space, and it was a very enjoyable experience. I think everyone was loving the fact this was such a new, different thing, you know?
Yeah, wow. Yeah. And how long did the entire project take from basically, you know, when you started recording until the record was released?
We did 10 days at Egram in 2014, and I flew Sly and Robbie and Bongo Herman, the famous Jamaican percussionist, and Bopi, our Jamaican guitarist, who toured with Dennis Brown, and it was a really, really nice rhythm section. And then we had these Cuban legends. It was about, I think in the end for the first record, there were over 50 different musicians, you know. It was just so many. But so many vocalists I wanted to work with in Jamaica, and I didn't have the funds to fly everyone in, you know. So basically, I used those 10 days to get all the instrumentals together. And I got a lot of the Cuban vocals, choruses, and melodic ideas. And then after those 10 days, I did a lot more sessions in Cuba, smaller sessions with vocalists, one-on-one or a small group. Then I took all that music back to Jamaica, and that's where I linked up with Turbulence and Luton Fire and all these singers that I wanted to work with that I hadn't been able to fly into Cuba, you know?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so there were a lot of vocal overdubs done. Because literally, ototherwise, I would have had to pay for 30 flights, or something. And it just, it wouldn't make sense. So what the magic was having the Cuban and Jamaican musicians in the studio together in Cuba, in Havana, at Egram, that was the magic. And then I took some time to sort of mix and arrange those instrumentals. And like I said earlier, some choruses we'd already recorded. Then I took it to the vocalist to kind of to complete the songs,
Wow. Okay. And then I guess you would have to go through some editing process, cleaning up,
Oh my God, yes. I mean, some of the tracks had like 20 musicians on them. So I realized pretty quickly, depending how I was going to arrange the songs, I could pull out 8 instruments and it would still sound good. If I had everything at once, maybe sometimes it was too busy. Yeah. Some of the tracks I wanted to strip back. So there was a lot of freedom there. As a producer, it was basically... And I also recorded it quite cleverly. I had Sly, his drums in isolation. I had the Cuban double bass in isolation. I had Bongo Herman's percussion in isolation. Then in the main room in Egram, I had the piano, the horns, percussion. So you get that amazing room sound. And then I had Robbie's bass in the main control room, DI'd, and I'd have guide vocals in the mixing room, DI'd as a guide. Then later we'd record them with a better mic setup and more preparation, Yeah. So this way it was really good. It meant I had enough live mix to get that feeling of a live sound, and enough isolation that later I could do remixes or just totally dramatically or radically change the arrangements,
When you say in isolation, so the drummer was in his own room, I guess?
Yeah, so basically you can imagine Egram is this beautiful big rectangular room with these amazing yellow wooden panels all around and beautiful wooden floorboards. And at the back of that room, there were 3 booths. Yeah. So I had Sly's drums and the double bass and Jamaican percussion isolated in those 3 rooms. And then, I had the grand piano, horns, and the percussion in the main room with a little isolation, but not much. It's really, really mixed. And then in the mixing room, that's where I'd have Robbie on bass. He wanted to have his own space and a guide vocal.
And were they all still able to see each other? Are the rooms arranged with glass windows?
Vibe they could hear each other, and there was enough of a window that they could at least see. Yeah. But headphones were very important, so everyone could hear. Yeah,
good. And obviously that gave you all the abilities to chop it up later.
Exactly, arrange, rearrange, and remix.
And how many takes did you record per song approximately?
Yeah, often the songs are like that first song I mentioned that became the Ernest Wrangler instrumental. I think we did 3 takes. 3 or 4 takes, and maybe a couple rough starts, and then generally 2 or 3 takes, and we know that one of them would be the winner. Yeah, and almost everything with a click track as well.
Oh yeah, right. Okay.
Just to keep things tight, and also again later if we were going to remix or stuff, we know we wouldn't have to it wouldn't be super painful process. There was 1 or 2 tracks we did without click track because the musicians asked, but generally everything was click track.
Yeah, cool, nice. And then how long did the mixing stage take? Did you start mixing yourself, let's say, on your computer? Or?
Well, I do rough mixes of everything, especially to get it ready for the vocals. But for the final mix, we took it down. I took all the sessions down to Melbourne, and we mixed on the Sing Sing SSL. It's a Gold series, is it? G series?
It's a 9000K, if I'm not mistaken.
There you go. And we mixed everything on that. It's to sound amazing. So we wanted to get that level of... We want it to be very beautiful and analog and warm, and not just mix in the box.
And how long did the mixing stage take?
I think we do 2 songs a day, mix 2 songs a day, basically. So
that's good.
Yeah, I think it's like would have been a good week or so, or 10 days. But then we'd bounce from the SSL, we'd bounce out stems. And then adjust those stems as well. We wouldn't try and get a final mix again because we wanted stems for remixes. So we'd basically get these massive sessions, maybe like 50 tracks or more, down to about 10 stems. Yeah. And then from them we could take our time from the SSL. We get 10 stems, and then we could take our time in the box, so to speak, just EQing or slightly adjusting or
straightening it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And who mastered that record?
It was mastered by Joe Laporta in Sterling Studio, New York.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it was interesting. Carnival was our first single in 2017. And I said that, we were like, we didn't know who we were going to master. So I actually sent it to 7 or 8 mastering engineers.
Yeah, right.
And I explained, look, we've got this project, but we're not sure who we want to get to master. Could you master this and give us a demo? And Joe's master was just a mile ahead of everyone else's.
Yeah, right.
He just managed to get that beautiful top end without it sounding harsh. He just opened up and brought the mixes to life, but not too loud and not too squashed. It was just perfect for the project.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah.
Nowadays, a lot of people mix and master themselves. What's your take on this? Is that a good idea?
Again, I feel like I'd be too close to the mix, and also mastering such a unique art. I'm not qualified to master. I can just do some basic mastering sometimes for people. But yeah, for this level of our project, I wanted one of the best mastering engineers in the world. That's why we went with Sterling. I've got 3 record labels. The project has a lot of visibility. I want it to sound. I wanted to meet that kind of very high level audio, sound and quality, so to speak.
Fantastic! Wow, what a journey! And then, of course, the next stage was a lot of promotion, and you toured.
Well,
a lot.
We were lucky. We did this. My filmmakers that came to Cuba, we did a little 3-minute promotion. It became like the EPK for the project.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. Actually, in 2017, I just posted that on the Havana Meets Kingston Facebook page without any publicity or promotion or ads or anything. And I think we had 900 followers at that time. And it went viral. Within a day, it had got to 1.5 million views. And
no way.
Tens of thousands of comments and everyone tagging each other. Let's go to Cuba. Let's go to Jamaica. It was sort of during the Trump era, and I think everyone was just over the racism, and they could see this project, how beautiful and inclusive and celebratory it is, and it's such a good vibe off that 3-minute introduction video, and people love the idea of the project again. This video went viral, and it was amazing to watch, because that night I went out to a friend's property. They didn't have much reception, and that night I dreamt that millions of people all over the world were listening to it. And literally I woke up and it was true. It had gone from 800,000 to 1.5 million in 8 hours.
Wow.
And that was really good for the project, because suddenly we could show the record labels, look, people are going to love this. And that's how we got ABC on board. We got Barco Records in France to do Europe distribution. We got VP to come on board for the rest of the world distribution. Yeah. And Havana Meets Kingston too. We've got another US label involved too, Kumbancha Records, who are involved with the Putumayo world music releases. And it's been really nice to have that support,
Fantastic. And do I remember correctly, did you get some of the musicians to Australia to tour with you?
Yeah, in 2018 we did a massive tour. I don't know how we pulled it off, and we'll never be able to repeat it, actually, because both Bopey and Robbie have passed away, It's just really sad. But
it is.
Sly and Robbie we brought to Australia. We had Barbarito Torres from the Buena Vista Social Club, and it's a real meeting of legends, and it was so good to have them here. We did WOMAD Australia, WOMAD New Zealand, and we did big shows in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane.
Wow. Okay. Well, and then recently you did it all again.
Yes.
And now let's talk about part 2, which is about to be released. So we're hopefully
June 3. So it's a bit less than 3 weeks away.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks.
Tell us about how that record came to be.
Well, luckily in these 10-day sessions at Egram in Havana, I was thinking to do a 15-track album, I think maybe I probably knew we would be able to record a bit more music, but I didn't actually know how prolific the group was going to be. So I did 10 days in Egram, planning for 1 or 2 songs a day. We were doing 3, 4, 5 songs a day in the end. So I had to every night quickly write new charts and, oh my God, what are we going to do tomorrow? I'm unprepared, to keep up with the band. And it was a really interesting day in the middle of the sessions where I think it was Robbie actually said, let's kick out the Cubans for half a day. Let's just have the Jamaicans. And so in that half day, I think I did 8 rhythms with Sly and Robbie and Bongo Herman and Bo P. It was so nice. So there was already immediately enough material for 2 or 3 records from the outset.
Wow.
So with Havana Meets Kingston Part 2, I went back to those original sessions, and about half this new album has Sly and Robbie, and about half the sessions are completely new. So, and the new album, I want to focus a lot more on original material. The first album, we do these really interesting versions or re-recordings, reimaginings, if you like, of some Buena Vista Social Club classics like Chan Chan and Candela and El Cuarto de Tula. But with this record, there's only a couple of 3 covers, I think, and much more original music and much more groundbreaking. one of my favorite singles from the new album is a song called Wadashada, and we did a beautiful music video on a 1920s casa in Havana that was a gift from the Spanish king to the Cuban family because they'd helped save his life in in the Spanish Civil War, I think it was. And we did this music video all in period, so everyone dressed in 1940s and 30s clothes, and it's amazing music. Cool. And it starts with this Cuban flamenco, and then it builds into a Spanish groove, and then it goes into salsa. Then there's an Afrobeat rhythm in there, and then it goes into timbo, which is the modern salsa style. So it's a very dynamic song, and really special music video.
Wow. So it was all based on some original rhythm tracks, and then you just added overdubs and
lots of overdubs, lots of kind of, often, I'll write the basic sketch at the piano generally and find some nice chords or some riffs, and then when I take it to the musicians, it'll expand from there. So often there's new ideas will come about that really unexpected, and then I always just jump on that. If there's a moment of inspiration or some cool idea, or I get a flash of inspiration, then I just will go with it, So some of the tracks were recorded, like the Clinton Ferrin song from Clinton Ferrin, who sang with the Gladiators, the famous Jamaican vocal group. His rhythm track is actually one of the tracks we did just with the Jamaicans at Egram with Sly and Robbie, and he loved that song. So later he wrote vocals, and we recorded that in Paris.
In Paris?
Yeah, he was in Paris at the time.
Yeah, right.
And so, because again, I couldn't take all the singers to Cuba or Jamaica, so I work, when I travel the world, I'm working with them as I go along. So every song has different kind of story how it come about, but what the whole project has in common is these amazing Jamaican and Cuban musicians playing together. And then later when I do the vocals, I'll work with, if there's a vocalist I want to work with, obviously I'll reach out to them, and if they're in Europe or the UK, or if they're in Jamaica, then that's where I'll link with them.
Fantastic. And how many songs have you got on that new record?
The new record's 15 tracks, I believe.
Wow, that's big for an album.
Yeah, there's a couple, there's one really nice, short instrumental with Rolando Luna and Barbarita Torres. It sounds like it was straight from the Buena Vista Social Club sessions. But it's 14 full tracks and an interlude style track, I think. So, beautiful.
It's ridiculously beautiful musicianship, at least what I know at this stage. So
I can play some more tracks today, and then hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, you'll be able to play some of the songs too.
Fantastic. What are your plans next? Are you going to?
So I'm flying to Cuba tomorrow, actually.
Oh, really?
I'm doing all my paperwork now, so hopefully everything's going to be smooth. Wish me luck, please, because flying after the pandemic's a lot more complicated now. And but I've got a big concert in Cuba, May 26th, for the Havana World Music Festival.
Wow.
So that's the Havana Meets Kingston band with some special guests in Havana, and I've also got some nice DJ gigs over there. Then I'm flying to London for Glastonbury Festival, which I'm so excited. And I'm not. That's not with Havana Meets Kingston. I'm doing 2 or 3 DJ sets there at Glastonbury. And then we've got a Havana Meets Kingston tour in Europe, which is 6 festivals, maybe more, but definitely 6 confirmed. And that's in July. And then I'm hoping to. I was in Mauritius a few months ago and did a really nice show there. So I'm hoping to get back there. And actually, I'd like to get into, because I'm so close to Africa there, so I'd like to do a bit more recording. And I've only traveled to Morocco before, so I'm really hoping to get to Ghana, possibly Senegal, and a few other places, and experience the African music scene.
Wow!
And possibly with a project in mind for next year, So
Wow!
Yeah.
What a journey.
Yeah,
that sounds phenomenal.
It's been 2 years of pandemic. I'm ready to fly, literally, metaphorically, musically,
Yeah. You look ready. You look like you're ready to jump. Fantastic.
Byron's getting a bit cold and cloudy. It's dark by 5 p.m. Yeah, I'm ready for the Europe summer for sure. Nice. Bring it on.
Look, Jake, I would like to change the subject, if that's okay.
Okay.
Just one question with young producers in mind. Now, if you think about young musicians who are just starting out, who are right at the beginning of their journey.
Yep.
Have you got one piece of advice, the most important thing from, a very experienced engineer like yourself to all the young people? What is it they should focus on? What is the one piece of advice you wish you had received when you were at the beginning?
Well, I guess, I mean, the biggest thing is just go for it, Like, I think I was lucky enough to travel a lot from a young age because my mum's Australian, but my dad's Maltese English, and he was living, he lives in the UK. So from the age of 16, I was flying to Europe, every couple of years or so to visit him. And I think that gave me a taste for music of the world, and it expanded. I was already listening in Melbourne on PBS. I was already listening to lots of world music shows, but the travel really helped expand my listening palette. So I'd say to young producers, don't be afraid, don't be shy. Listen to as much different music as possible. A lot obviously in Australia we're dominated by commercial radio and so forth. So expand, listen to underground music, different genres, listen to music from around the world, like expand your palette, and don't be afraid. The world's your oyster. There's no limit, I learned the beautiful thing about music is it opens doors. Like really, like when I first went to Jamaica, I had no idea I'd be able to link with major artists over there, but music is just, it opens doors, and the love for music opens doors. And a lot of musicians, my idols, like artists like Capleton and Sizzler, Anthony B, they want to work. They want to link with producers. They were ready to go, So it was much easier for me to link with these artists than I was imagining. And so I think, work on the quality of what you do, and work hard at your your musicianship and your production skills. And get your music to a high level, and then just go for it,
Just go for it. Yeah. That's the essence I'm getting out of it. That's good advice. Yeah. Last question for today. If people want to know more about it, where should they go? What is your online presence? Where should people start to
Sure. Well, I have Bandcamp, and that's a nice place to hear my music in high quality. That's MISTA SAVONA, MISTA spelled MISTA. Savona spelled SAVONA. You can also look up the Havana Meets Kingston website, and my Spotify's got good listeners. I think I'm on about 20 million streams or something across my projects, which is really nice. You can definitely find me on Spotify and SoundCloud and so forth. Okay. And
I'm going to put all these links into the show notes. So
beautiful.
Just finish the episode, go straight there, click the buttons, and listen to Jake's music.
And you're welcome to put some of the songs in the podcast too, if that's like if you'd like to have some music in the background or something.
Well, if you give me permission, I would love to maybe just give a little teaser.
Yeah, because it'd be nice to have the bit of the music. People can hear it as through the episode. It'd be great.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate this.
No worries.
And thank you for meeting with me today and sharing all your wisdom. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Jake.
No, thank you. It's nice to talk about music, isn't it?
It is. Thank you so much.
All right, cheers, man.
Cheers.
Thank you. Wow,
how good was that? Mr. Jake Savona gave us so much insight into his production of the Havana Meets Kingston albums. Thank you so much. This is really, really inspiring. After we finished the interview, Jake showed me some new music in his home studio. A nice pair of speakers set on a small desk in a medium-sized room. It didn't look anything like a studio at all. And Jake told me that a lot of water came through this house in the recent floods, hence the sparse improvised appearance. It must have been terrible. But Jake spoke about it all as if it was just a minor bump on the road. His mind seemed to be in full speed ahead mode. Off to the next adventure, off to more musical projects. In fact, actually just hours or just minutes after I left, he went off towards the airport, constantly on the move. I really got a sense of Jake's unstoppable can-do attitude. Jake's album Havana Meets Kingston Part 2 is coming out June 3rd, 2022. So 3 days after the release of this podcast interview. So the countdown is on, everybody. But if you can't wait to have a listen, head over to the show notes. I added links to Mr. Savona's social channels, and he also gave me 7 music videos, which are all there in the show notes for you. Each one is fantastic and well worth watching start to finish. But I'd like to point out one in particular. It's called Guarachara, which I probably pronounce incorrectly. But I reckon it might just be one of the best music videos I've ever seen. So if you enjoyed this episode today, please head over to mixartist.com.au/production talk. to find heaps more amazing interviews with inspiring musical guests. Or hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. And while you're there, give this podcast a 5-star rating, please. This would mean the world to me. But most importantly, spread the message and recommend this podcast to all your friends and all your fellow self-producing musicians everywhere. And of course, I'd like to invite you to visit me at mixartist.com.au, where I offer music mixing services to musicians who demand nothing but the best sound and tasteful musical mixes. That's what I love to do. That's all for today. If you want to hang around for a little bit longer and listen to Jake's music, a little teaser here for you. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. You have a fantastic week. Bye for now.
Tú me quieres dejar, yo no quiero sufrir. Contigo me voy, mi santo, aunque me cueste morir.